Welcome to the Emerald Athlete Podcast. I'm your host, Chrissy Doyle, and on this podcast I speak to different Irish athletes about their highs, their lows, biggest battles, biggest successes, and why they fell in love with their sport. In this episode I chat to former Premier League player Gareth Farrelly. Gareth chats about his time playing with Bolton, Aston Villa and Everton. We also chat about the battles of being a professional footballer and the difficulties when retiring, and so much more. Without further ado, Gareth Farrelly. Gareth, how are you? You're very welcome to the podcast.
No, thanks for having me. Nice to see you. I'm currently in Etched in Barcelona today.
Oh, wow.
I'm visiting my daughter. She's studying over here, so it's nice to see you.
Yeah, a little break from the cold in the UK anyway, bit of warmth in Spain.
Yes, very much so. I think we all need heat in our bones. You get plenty of that where you are, but yeah, it's been a cold start to the year in Liverpool. Lots of storms and winds and things. So it's nice to come away and see the sun, even if the temperature is not great here yet. It's just a totally different kind of climate. So it's nice to get a few days away.
Yeah, you have to take every holiday you get, which is nice too. Absolutely. Gareth, I want to start off just by chatting to you about playing with Bohemians and maybe making that transition to go across to the UK. Just because I know at a young age, moving across to play football probably isn't an easy thing. Just chat to me about that experience.
Right. So, for the sake of the podcast, I struggle to remember what I did on Friday, Christopher, let alone 17. So I was at Home Farm, was my schoolboy club. And that was at a time when Home Farm would have been probably at its zenith as a schoolboy club. There was lots of different players who moved to England. And it was, I really enjoyed playing there. So I think at that time, and given how the game has changed now, it was, Ireland has always had an incredibly strong schoolboy game, very competitive. And at that time, there would have been a lot of players from home who would have gone to clubs as youth trainee scheme at the time or pro contracts. And as you started to, show promise, you would be a part of the Kennedy Cup team, which was kind of the Dublin District Schoolboy League, which is still has changed now slightly, but still the preeminent schoolboy competition. And then it would lead in towards the junior international squads, under 15s, under 16s. And by that time, you kind of had an idea if there was going to be an opportunity to move away. So for me, from Home Farm, there was lots of invitations to different clubs where you could kind of go on trial. And trial was in some ways a two-way thing with regards to, whether you found somewhere you liked or whether you found somebody that you felt would help you develop. In my case, having gone to lots of clubs and been very fortunate to have lots of different offers, the club that I settled on and the person that I actually felt most comfortable with would have been a guy called Dave Richardson, who was the youth development officer at Aston Villa at the time. So again, stupidly, Christopher, for your podcast, I'd been offered more money at other clubs. I'd been offered, longer contracts. I'd been offered pro contracts. But the decision to sign for Aston Villa was made as much on the fact that Dave Richardson was there. I'm like, it can be a challenging time for players and their family to trying to figure out which is the right club. They call it pathways now with regards to how you might develop and move through the levels to get to the first team. But the main person involved in me going to Villa would have been Dave Richardson. The irony for me was he was incredibly capable and had a terrific reputation. But within kind of a few months of me signing for Villa, he was actually headhunted to set up the youth kind of department in the Premier League, and he left. So that was it. So, dreams, aspiration, playing schoolboy football, looking to excel at schoolboy football, start to attract interest from England clubs and beyond. And then, get an opportunity to have an offer and then kind of weigh up where you go. So Bohemians for me was a lot later than schoolboy football. Some way schoolboy football would have been like local club, and then as you progress, I wanted to move to a higher schoolboy level, which was Home Farm, and I had a terrific time there. And then obviously the next step was to move to England.
Perfect. I actually had it the other way around. I had Bohemians and Home Farm, completely different. So that's on me.
Yeah. No. It is. It was a later stage, but again, football is changing now at home, which you might keep an eye of. We're living away. But the point is, at that time, and I'm still a massive supporter of it now. Schoolboy football has changed at home hugely, with the association putting more of an emphasis on, academy football now they're calling it, or having a affiliation to a League of Ireland club. But schoolboy football in Ireland has always been incredibly competitive, and that's changing now. So at that time, I know we're talking, and that's my bad gag maybe, but we're talking about, I moved away in 1992, so we're talking a lot of years, as they say.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Gareth. I was born in '92. I don't mean to do that to you, but just when you say '92,
that's how to make me feel really special on a Sunday morning. Yeah, the more people you meet now and they say, "Well, I wasn't born then." Yeah, so yeah, different time.
And tell me, obviously you said your man moved away when you went to Villa. How was your time then at Villa once he moved away, or how did that end up for you then, Gareth?
I think the club, I had lots of different challenges when I was there. Do you know what I mean? I made my debut, I played in the first team, I did all of the things that I'd set out to do, but I had a lot of issues with some of the coaches there. You know what I mean? Which obviously didn't resolve themselves until a lot later. And I think that it's probably a different environment again now in clubs, although not as it's portrayed. But it was very, very challenging. There's a host of different challenges. We're all challenged in what we do every day. It's like, say, you move away, it's different challenges. From an Irish perspective, having family and friends. People have close networks, communities, and when you step outside of that, it can be quite a challenge. So I think there's an initial part to that, which is moving away, which is a massive, massive step. Some people find it incredibly difficult. Some people less so, and then you have the football itself. And the point is, if you move away to play football, in my case, I signed on a professional contract. There was huge expectation when I came away. I did incredibly well at the start when I got there, but then I got injured and I missed the best part of the first season. So having left home to play football and then all of a sudden having a situation where you're injured, and I was in digs, which was the physio's house. So I was spending all of my time at the training ground with the physio and then all of my time at home in his home. It was incredibly intense. So lots of different challenges. And like I said, all of those challenges to the outside world, people don't really see them. But if you're not playing football, and for me, with homesickness, that first year, not playing, people not understanding that I had an injury, you don't see any reason to be there. So, football is the easy part. The game is the easy part, even now. So when you were born in 92, but my point is that the game is still the same. That's why everybody loves it. But there's just so many different elements around it that can make it incredibly challenging. And everybody's journey is unique in that way.
Yeah, and even the comfort you might get at home, as you'd know, when you're in your own environment, but you going away, then wanting to play football, as you say, getting injured. Sometimes the comfort of a home in your home environment is just will help or ease it almost for you. But you being then away and having to deal with all those challenges is just so tough, Gareth.
Yeah, well, it's different because you live away, right? So again, there's going to be massive pluses to that, but I think it's a support network. So I think there's a comfort to that, and I think you move across into an incredibly competitive environment, right? In my case, I was probably one of the only ones that had a pro contract, which basically meant you had another bullseye on your back because you were training with people every day who just wanted to kick lumps out of you because you had what they wanted. Right. And then you're dealing with the insecurity of dressing rooms. You're dealing with the insecurity of being a young man growing up. You're dealing with all of those different challenges, and you don't have the separation of going home to your family every day. You're conducting your relationships. Like now we've got podcasts, we've got cameras, we've got FaceTime, we've got, none of those things were there. I'm going to sound really, really old now, Christopher, but like where we lived, there was another really, really good guy. He was from Cork. And we used to probably walk 10 to 12 minutes, nearly every night up to a BT payphone in the local village. Right? So this is going to make me sound like 120 years old, right? Where we would go to the local shop, we would get coins, and then we would go up and ring home, ring family, ring friends, girlfriends. And that was how we communicated. We wrote letters, not emails, you know what I mean? WhatsApp. It was a completely different time.
I almost don't believe you, to be honest with you, Gareth. I actually think you're having me on a small, to be honest.
No. Listen, you can check after as part of your due diligence. 1992, that was it. BT's profits were huge around the Birmingham area.
Oh, it's just thinking of you walking outside your building, walking for 10 or 12 minutes up to a phone to make the phone call. It just seems like, when was that ever happening? But obviously
no, it's incredible. And listen, it took me, it was 94, 95 before mobile phones came out, and even that was a shift in itself. So it was a completely different world then. And like you speak to a generation before me, they'll have a completely different version of their experience as well. So that's aside from all of the football. That's aside from all of those things.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
My first mobile phone was like a shoebox with an aerial. It was like you needed two people to carry it.
Oh, jeez. I was talking actually to Sean O'Shea recently, Garen, and he was telling me about how it is today with the professional setup, let's say, of the day-to-day things. Back when you went over, could you just give us maybe an example of what the ins and outs day-to-day would be for training and different things? What would you have done?
No, the professionalism was still there. I think sometimes people, can be quite dismissive of the past. And so obviously it's moved on huge levels now with regards to sports science, data, analytics, whatever you want to talk about it. But fundamentally, you're still dealing with individuals. You're still dealing with development. Like you played football every day. You know what I mean? And there was less science around it, but there was people who had, been experienced at the highest level of the game. So, it was different. It was different, but there wasn't probably that level of monitoring, analysis, or sports science that's there now. But for me, although I say 92, there was the start of that. Do you know what I mean? So like people talk about the game sometimes as if it's only started since 92 when the Premier League started. So, when I was at home in Dublin before I moved away, I was extremely fortunate that I had an international athlete, Mary McManus, when she got married, who lived close to me, and I used to run with her. She was a 400-meter runner. So I was getting access to an elite athlete at 13, 14. She was an incredible athlete. So the point was, I was aware of that when I came away. Do you know what I mean? When I was at home farm, my dad used to drive me to Bowes twice a week so I could train with the League of Ireland team because I was training at a level above my schoolboy football. You know what I mean? So going then into a professional environment is a massive shock physically, mentally, because everything at the start is that bit quicker and that more intense. You go from being a big fish in a little pond to a little fish in a big pond, and everybody wants what you have, and everybody wants to knock you out of the way to get there. So professionalism was there. It was just different. So like you say, talking about the modern game and having that conversation, we wouldn't have known any different at the time. But we were playing football every day, and you'd never done that before. There was the intensity of training, the structure of training, how it was done. But as I say, for me, I had kind of an understanding from different sports of what best practice looked like. And then I was fortunate in the UK, either within a club or either externally, to meet people that were kind of thought leaders or ahead of the game with regards to sports science anyway. So, at 20 was a friend of mine, Ed Baranowski, who worked in football for years and years, who I still speak to now, who was a brilliant guy. And we used to do extra sessions with him twice a week, and we were using heart monitors. Nobody else was using heart monitors then. We were training differently. You know what I mean? So there was the easy answer is with regards to then and now, there was the start of those things. Arsene Wenger then came into Arsenal, and there was a shift, professionalism with regards to how different things were done. And football, like Formula One, is quite innovative. You know what I mean? Once people see things, they then want to understand it and look to implement it themselves. They might not have the level of knowledge, but again, there tends to be a carry where people will go, right, why are we doing this? And then try and identify and isolate the best people to help you get better.
Yeah, no, unbelievable. I don't know why it comes into my head, but just when you're talking about different things being implemented, it's like the set piece coach. Somebody sees somebody doing the set piece coach, then everyone wants to bring it in, and just, there's different things getting added on all the time. But yeah, and you know what? That's the one thing when you even say that back in the day, maybe people might slag it as not as professional as now, but you still had to turn up each day and train as hard as you could, and there was a squad of you there all wanting to play on the team. So, that's definitely true from what you say as well.
Yeah. It's one of the most competitive environments in the world. But like, again, for me, I look at the game now and I look at the game then, and I think, there's different debates and different conversations to be had around the ability level of players, the quality of players. Again, I think Arsene Wenger spoke recently and spoke about how we've moved to a position now where we're probably at the maximum of physical capabilities, right? And we need to return to improving the technical side of the game again. Whereas I think for me, when I played, I would say that I think I was very, very fortunate to play at a good time where there was a lot of quality players. You know what I mean? The game has changed hugely. Like, you talk of physical capabilities and we talk about home, you look at the quality of the rugby yesterday. You look at Ireland, you look at what they've done, you look at where they are. You can't help but respect what they do, right the way through. You look at GAA, you know what I mean? You look at like the most professional, non-professional game, as we move to the championships now, you look at all of those things. So like, sport is fascinating in that regard. I think the danger sometimes is that we can talk about data, we can talk about sports science, we can talk about strategy, but you live or die by the quality of the people that are involved in your organisation. So you're back to kind of leadership and culture and all of the different things around that. I think the scary thing for me is I can sit and have a chat with you on a Sunday morning, right? And if you were to say to me, how many good managers or coaches did you have? I could probably count it on one hand.
Jeez, that's unbelievable. I mean, you think of where you were as well. You were in prime in the UK around the Premier League, where you think the standard is high across the board, and that, there'd be so many stories to tell of all the great coaches and managers. You just nearly, I would assume from the outside in, that almost the quality would actually have to be high at a certain level.
No, but that's what you assume, and you assume that rightly, but that's because you've got an industry that is driven by a media that try and portray everybody as being superhuman. But the reality is, when you get under the bonnet of an industry, you realise in many cases that's not true. So I think there has been a shift again, you know what I mean? But I'm saying everybody you speak to would probably have a different story.
Yeah, and was there anybody, I suppose, while we're on that then, Gareth, any manager or coach that you played under where you thought he really had a great impact on me, or you really thought he was good, that stood out for you?
I think when you look back on a career now, and I'm old now, I'm getting older, right? I think you'd probably say you'd take bits from different ones. So again, people forget. So Ron Atkinson signed me at Aston Villa. You know what I mean? And was very charismatic and like loved his players. I would say Howard Kendall was very similar. Terrific man manager, had been a terrific player, was always on the side of the players, very charismatic. Brian Little came into Aston Villa then, did very well. He would have been very organised, completely different character. Walter Smith came into Everton. I obviously didn't play for him a lot. I moved to Bolton. I was the first signing of Sam Allardyce, and I watched to see him develop. Do you know what I mean? In an Irish context, broke into the Irish team when Jack Charlton was there. Again, was an incredibly strong presence and character. Mick McCarthy, who was excellent.
Yeah, so you've got different bits from different managers. I suppose it's very hard to have the complete package, I suppose, where a manager would have the kind of dealing with the player side, the tactical side and everything. It's, I'd say there's very few managers that maybe probably would have all of those elements. of it. I even look at Pep Guardiola sometimes, and I kind of think the way he manages players, there's so many great players after leaving his team. Yes, he's a fantastic manager coach, but I'd always question, even looking from the outside, how is his management of players really?
Yeah. Who's your team, Christopher? Who do you support?
I'm a Liverpool fan.
All right, okay. So again, you've had an example of like the top managers recently. So obviously Jurgen Klopp and now Arne Slot. I think for me, I think Pep is exceptional. So again, I think when you look at when you look at him, I think he's changed the game different times. You look at Marcelo Bielsa. You look at people like you look at the really really top ones that most players would probably say I'd love to play for somebody like him. Do you know what I mean? So I think there's an intensity to Pep, but the point is, if you look at where he's been and what he's achieved, I think he's probably, arguably one of the best managers ever. But I think they bring those really, really top managers have something different with regards to, their emotional intelligence, skills that probably are outside of the game. So, and again, I think you can look across sport like that. They have a different skill set where I think they come across as caring for the players. They have relationships with the players. And the thing with football is that it's not rocket science. Again, sometimes people like to portray it as that. I think if you look at what Alex Ferguson did, he built an empire. If you look at Arsene Wenger, if you look now at the ones you look at, and I think, I played for good managers, but I didn't play for anybody like that. Now, that's as much down to me. I don't hold anybody else accountable for that, because I return to, being a bit older. If I reflect now on my career, people will say I achieved a lot, which I did all the dreams of what I wanted to do when I was a kid, but I never achieved my potential. So, immaturity, insecurity, fear, different things that when you're young, youth is wasted on the young. You don't really know yourself. You don't really understand all of these things. Whilst you've played schoolboy football, like I said, in Ireland, and been a big fish in a little pond, and have your family around you and everybody telling you how great you are. When you step into what's fundamentally a ruthless, industry, the game is the easy part. You never lose your love of the game. I'm sure you'll speak to lots of people on the podcast across lots of different sports. They'll never lose that love of the game. But the point is, it's not a game when you've been in and around it. It's a job. It's an industry, and it's cutthroat. So you become quite hardened to that. So you know what I mean? So especially that when you are outside of that, you're reliant a lot on the information and the sources of information you receive it from. So it's like it's a different world, and I think there's a massive intensity to that now. That whilst it was there through fans or tabloid media, when you look at the intensity around the game now, I think it's crazy, and I think I question sometimes whether I would have been able to function within that anyway, because I was a perfectionist. My personality is a perfectionist. If 9 people told me I did well after a game and 1 told me I was shit, that's the person I took home. So I can't imagine, and I know people deal with it in different ways. It's a different generation now, but I can't imagine having to deal with the intensity of social media now. I can't imagine that level of scrutiny. I struggle to understand how the game has changed so much that so much externally now has power over the game of itself. I think it's incredibly difficult for people, and I've got massive respect for them for that basis.
And would you feel sorry for the likes of let's say a Marcus Rashford now, who's just seems like he can't get it right on the pitch. He's having little issues outside. Everybody has a view, but nobody knows really what's going on, and just seems to be struggling. Just as I suppose a prime example.
Yes, yeah, but it's also indicative of the madness that exists around the game now. Like Marcus Rashford is an incredibly talented footballer, right? Marcus Rashford took on the UK government and beat them again, and has had to deal with a level of scrutiny that few of us could relate to. Do you know what I mean? But at the end of the day, even those that will have supported him when he was doing all of those things, wait in the long grass for things to go wrong and then completely, look to criticize, isolate, destroy somebody, and it becomes very difficult. It becomes very, very difficult. So for me, I hope for him, he finds, a balance and gets back to just playing the game for the love of the game. Because at the end of the day, when you finish, that's all you have. Do you know what I mean? And there's a frightening parallel with that you look at how short your career can actually be. But I think I've always thought he was an exceptional talent. I don't think you can say that about many. But I think in the last few years, he's had to deal with so many different things that are outside of the game. So it's back to my point about distraction. There's so many things can always distract you. You look at the top players, you look at how they're more than capable of remaining grounded and just being concentrated and totally committed to the game. From a Liverpool example, look at Mo Salah. He would be an example of someone you would look at and just say he's exceptional, isn't he? He's exceptional. You look at from the time he moved to Liverpool, where there was people questioning that transfer.
Yeah.
And you look at him now. So I think you can. Now. Yeah. But I'm saying, but he always had exceptional ability, but he hadn't put it all together. And then it can be the right player at the right club at the right time with the right manager. So you look at that, for me, would be one of those examples. If you look at Marcus Rashford, and it's easy to hypothesize, but if you think if he'd have been there at the zenith of Fergie's powers, would the situation be the same? So, football is a simple game. Professional sport, you can say it about rugby, game, whatever, but there's so many factors go into whether you're going to be successful or not. Does that club play a style that suits you? Are you pivotal to that system? And then the fan momentum builds. So if you look at the cleverness now is like Marcus Rashford this, Marcus Rashford that. He's talking about going out on loan at Aston Villa, and this is the ruthless nature of football again, of how quickly things can change, and it takes a lot of strength and it takes a lot of discipline to move away from the distractions and start to return to, right, what do you want to do? I want to play. Okay, what do you want to play? I want to fulfill my potential. I want to look back on my career and be able to say I fulfilled my potential. But even within that, it's difficult because you don't know the people he has around him. You don't know the agents. You don't know the advisors. You don't know all of those distractions. And it's very, very hard to strip those things back because your ego, and within your ego, you're still trying to deal with all of these things coming at you all of the time. So Marcus Rashford, for me, exceptional talent. I've got incredible respect for what he did. I don't know, for people who might listen, the position around, school dinners, the government were looking to remove school dinners. He started a campaign. He was at the forefront of the campaign. He drove the campaign and he made the UK government change policy. So some people will never do something like that in their lifetime. Some people will never achieve that on top of being an exceptional footballer at one of the most demanding clubs in the world. So there's going to be a knock-on effect from that. For me, I thought he had started to recover again, but now, there's different issues within the club. And looking at Manchester United, at the moment, you wouldn't look and say that that's a club that's managed as you would have expected, given the history and tradition of the club. So, no, and again, that's just my opinion. My opinion doesn't matter, you know what I mean? But I'm just saying that for me, you just want to see Marcus Rashford on the pitch with a smile on his face, playing the game he loves, not weighed down or distracted by all of the noise that exists around it.
Yeah, it's just so much, because I laughed at a clip. I love watching the overlap, and they were just chatting about Marcus Rashford, and Jamie Carragher basically had his hands up in the air and he was saying, who were all these people that are surrounding him? I remember when I was young, it was just me and my dad and that's it. But obviously now in the game, as you said, there's just so many people surrounding him, chatting to him in his ear and just different things like that. And you just don't know how many voices are going through or giving him advice, and it's very hard for him to take all of that on board.
Absolutely, but there's also agenda being played by the club. So it's like you say, it's not simple. It's not simple. And football is just opinions, but it comes back to the fundamental basis. Is what I said, is that right player, right club, right manager, right time, and all of those can determine whether your career is going to go in one particular way or another. And the point is that none of us were challenged every day. You'd be challenged in your day job. We're all challenged, but the more resourced you are, the more present you are, the stronger you are, the easier it is to deal with all of these different challenges that come. And I just think on an energy level, what Marcus Rashford went through over the last few years, the environment he's in, and again, it might be well-intentioned, doesn't appear to reflect that. So let's hope that he gets back to, his full quality and gets to enjoy the game again.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I think everybody wants to see. That just want to see him scoring goals again, smile on his face, taking on players. It'd be great to see. Speaking of Marcus Rashford and his talent, I want to talk about a goal that even Marcus Rashford would be proud of. Talk to me about your strike for Everton to help Everton survive relegation. I'm nearly sure it was against Coventry, a great strike.
Yeah, thank you for doing your research. The giggle up is you were 6 then.
Well, I didn't start it so well, but getting Bohemians and Home Farm mixed up, so I make it up for it.
No. Listen, that's for the listeners. That's for the listeners, just to make sure we have everything right. No, listen. This has been interesting now because okay, Liverpool fan, obviously this is Everton's last season at Goodison, and they move into Bramley Dock, the new ground, next year. So there's a massive, there's a lot of interest around history, legacy, heritage from Goodison. So I was doing an interview with somebody last week who's writing a book about Goodison Park, right? So I'm an Everton fan, Christopher. So I started supporting Everton long before you were born, right? 1983. And everybody at home supported Liverpool or Man United. We're all Celtic fans by birth anyway, right? But with regards to the UK, and I loved the kit. So they were sponsored by Le Coq Sportif, who I think have just gone into administration in France after the Olympics, right? But that was they were sponsored by Hafnia, and I started to follow them then. That was kind of Everton's purple period, their best times, if you like, through the 80s with Howard Kendall. So I when I left Aston Villa, I had lots of other clubs I could have signed for, but again, I wanted to play for Everton. I wanted to play for Howard Kendall. So, that was the reason I signed for Everton. And having come from a club, Aston Villa, that were like top 6, challenging, competing for cups, breaking through, young Irish boy in Birmingham, having a great time, right? So I moved to Everton with no thought for the fact that it had been a struggling team, that there'd been lots of different challenges, and I can say now, without probably really understanding the intensity of the city. So that year was a very tough year, right? I'd played well, I'd played poorly, I'd tried so hard, to do different things. I'd made goalkeepers show reels, I'd put balls in the stand, the corner flag, I'd hit everything. I was, playing for Ireland, but it was a tough year, and it was a huge challenge getting used to the intensity of Everton, and it's a tough place to play. A demanding fan base, and it didn't. It was a difficult year. Things didn't go. You want to win things, you want to compete, you want to be playing well every week. It was a different challenge. So, having come through all of the challenge through the course of a season, I never envisaged being involved in a last game of the season relegation battle at Goodison Park, where we had to, at the time, better the result of Bolton to stay in the Premier League. It was just never something I would have contemplated, right? So around all of that, you get a situation where you end up scoring a goal that becomes incredibly historically significant for the club you supported as a boy. So, it's a huge outcome for me, and something I'm incredibly proud of, right? But the reality of football is Howard Kendall was sacked. You think you build up some goodwill after scoring a goal like that, right? And it changed everything for me. But then you have a situation where the manager's sacked, new manager comes in and turns around and says, I don't want you.
Oh.
So,
how can you not want somebody after scoring the winning or scoring the goal to keep you out of relegation?
Yeah, but again, that's managers, that's football, and that's people's opinions, right? So I went from, the highlight of that to playing 8 minutes Premier League football the following season. I came on as a sub against Newcastle, and I played in the equivalent of a Carabao Cup game. So that's the realities to the game. So, you move on, your life moves on, right? Football is such a small part of your life. I never really gave it a lot of thought. And, I'm probably unusual in that context now with regards to like a career after your career, right? But the point was, it only became significant to me, I think, when my son was very young and I took him to his first game at Goodison, right? And before the game, when we went in to sit down, before they play Z cars, which is, again, kind of the tradition around Everton as the teams come on. And on the big screen was the goal. And my son was looking at that. And I kind of got to see it through his eyes. Do you know what I mean? Which was a big thing. But with regards to my football career, you talk about a positive, which it is, don't get me wrong. But then I can equally apply a memory to it that's not necessarily a positive one. So, I was an Everton fan. I probably didn't present that well at the time. You know what I mean? So there was an increased significance because the last thing as an Everton fan I would have ever wanted to contemplate or see was Everton being relegated. And it's still the case now. So no, it's just this was one of the conversations I was having. You talk about people measure bravery in different ways, or people apply, cliches, or people have stories. Everything has a story. But the point for me was, I always laugh now, modern day terms, to what people say. Michael Jordan used to say, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So for me, that had been a tough season. I'd had lots of shots that didn't go in, but you keep going and then you get a reward on the last day of the season. So that was that particular outcome. It's taken on an increased historical significance over time. You become typecast in many ways because when things are going well, people don't want to speak to you. But when they're near the bottom of the table, people always want to, oh yeah, you can speak to him because he's got an experience of this. So yeah, again, just part and parcel of the game.
Yeah, and if you had to pick a strike though, Gareth, to be fair, of all the goals, if you're saying you hit if you hit it over the bar, you hit the corner flag, if you had to pick a goal, rather than getting a 2-1 win in the season or a draw, to get the goal to keep up the most important one, that was the one you really wanted.
Yes, absolutely. But again, at the time, you would have taken a different outcome. That the significance of that is fascinating because I still meet people today who tell me where they were that day. You know what I mean? What their experience was with their families, and there's still people, and they're the nice parts again.
Yeah, which is really nice. And just I have a friend actually from Liverpool, and he've actually family and relations that are big Everton supporters, and they've asked me to ask you questions. I'm going to ask you to just say, how often do you actually watch the goal that you actually scored? Do you ever watch it back?
No, not now. As I say, my son tends to be the person that does all of the research online, looking back at goals or games or different things like that. So yeah, not so much now. But it's something of significance. It's something nice to be there.
Absolutely. And you just mentioned there, Gareth, I want to speak to you as well, just your time at Bolton, because I know you mentioned Sam Allardyce and, working under Sam Allardyce. And what was it like? Because that was probably a special team at that time for Bolton as a club, a special group of players. What was it like around that time?
Oh, well, this was the kind of start of Sam's managerial career, if you like. So the thing for me was, having not played at Everton because of the manager, there was different opportunities for loans, different opportunities to get away. And as a footballer, it's a bit like being a boxer. If you're training every day, but there's no fight, you don't really feel like you're fulfilling your career. And the reality was, in not playing, you lose your place in the Ireland squad, you lose your standing, you lose your confidence. You're playing in the reserves. There's a battle going on at a club that is a different battle to what people see. which is always clubs deploying different tactics to try and encourage people to leave. It's not easy. And then you get an opportunity to go out on loan, or you get an opportunity to move away, and it's like parole. Yeah, so I signed for Bolton. I was Sam's first signing. You step down a league because you want to prove yourself again, and that did coincide then with promotion to the Premier League and being back in what was a really, really strong period for Bolton. You know what I mean? And ended up them, competing at the top end of the Premier League, qualifying for Europe, and all of those things. So, yeah, it was. I had 5 years there.
Yeah, and just even some of the players, would you have played with the likes of, I suppose, JJ Okocha? Was that around that time? And so some of that the golden period of players for Bolton?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think sometimes, again, people forget is that the spine or the strength of that group was there already. You had Jussi Jääskeläinen was exceptional. You had Gudni Bergson. You had Per Franson. There was a really, really strong core. You had Michael Ricketts was exceptional when he came. And I think what Sam did well, although there was a lot of signings, was that he was able to then attract a higher level of player who came in. And sometimes, you don't know how those things are going to work. But JJ Okocha was an exceptional player who did incredibly well. But there was also others. Yuri Jokayev was the first one who came in. He was a World Cup winner. Had won the Euros. He was exceptional as well, and that kind of lifted the standard and raised everybody. So, yeah, it was a good time. The challenge for me was, for a lot of people, I was the person that had scored the goal that had relegated Bolton. Right, so you go from you step down, you play, you score on your debut. You face challenges as always. You have a part to play in an exceptional season where you get promoted to the playoffs. You score, but still fundamentally, a lot of people are saying, "Well, you got us relegated." So again, that's the game. That's the game. That's part of it. I can talk to you, and for people who listen to the podcast, the reality is, football, as in life, a lot is about decision making. You know what I mean? And I mentioned the word distraction a lot. If I didn't believe things were being done in a particular way, again, as a perfectionist, I would end up falling out with managers over it. I would end up in confrontational and conflictual situations. And the point is, you're never going to win them. You never beat the system. So the point is that as opposed to focusing on yourself and understanding and maturity, or having different support around you, you end up making bad decisions. And I made a lot of bad decisions that on reflection I probably wouldn't do now.
Yeah, and do you know what? Some players it's probably unfortunate for you, Gareth, in a way, because you'd hear so many times now with players who, challenge the standards and want to do better, are nearly applauded and praised, and that's nearly a good thing now and accepted. But it shows that a club or a management team are not doing what they're supposed to be doing, basically, if players are actually challenging, why are we not at this standard, or why are we not doing things better?
Yes, but as a player, you see, you're only focused on yourself. And sometimes you don't understand that a manager has to balance and deal with a lot of different things around that. And that's back to that maturity and understanding again. And I think it would probably lead well on to, I laugh at it now, and you think to yourself, I walked away from the Premier League at 28. Do you know what I mean? Because I'd had enough. I'd had enough. And again, a decision now you would turn around and say, would never do that. But when you fall out of love with something, or when you're in a different mindset, you don't have the space or the presence or the awareness to be able to go, well, no, hang on a second here. You need to just focus on yourself. If you focus on yourself and focus on your talent, then all of those other things are external. They don't affect you directly. And, and that was, again, when I look at players now, you can identify examples, or you can identify from conversations where those people's mindsets are at. So again, like you talk about the overlap, but again, everybody has a different experience of the career. Everybody has different stories to tell. Everybody, it's amazing to hear people talk honestly, say when they finish, about insecurities, challenges, realities they faced when they played. But you're preoccupied. It's that kind of, mentality within the game that you very rarely know how people are feeling.
Yeah, and I just say there's so much, as you said before, Gareth, going on as well. It's so much to take on board that you'd have to have a range of feelings, and you'd really have to have good people around you. You know what I mean? Just even, give you that advice and say, look, you should need to battle through this. You can just deal with the controllables, and the things that you can't control, just leave them off. But it's very hard without maturity or growing up, or it's even if you are, it's very hard to come to that conclusion and say that to yourself. Sometimes you just need that extra bit or a good voice around you.
Yeah, absolutely, and they're the things, I think, when you've had a different experience, they're all the things that you can see. They're all the things you can see and recognize that the different challenges people face. So again, it comes back to that same point: is that the game is the easy part.
You don't get time to think on the pitch, only for the ball, I suppose. Everything else is irrelevant at the time.
No. But there's a rhythm to that, because when you're present and when you're playing at the peak of your powers, all of those things, there's a musicality to those things like that. It's just, that's the easy part. So for me, like, I never understood fandom. I never understood. You were always chasing the perfect game. I just wanted to be left alone. I didn't need people for that. This is me having a conversation with you today. Nearly 50 years of age. I didn't have these skills when I was younger. I didn't understand it. I just wanted to be left alone. And that people had an illusion that, oh, well, Gareth just does this, or Gareth, he did that. But they didn't see in the background the additional work or the extra work or the detail that went into things. It was, and I very rarely had people within the staff or in an environment that allowed me to be. When I did, that's when I produced my best football. There was different people in clubs at different times. At Everton, it would have been the person I mentioned to you before, Ed Baranowski again. At Bolton, it was the physios. There was a physio, Mark Leather, there, who I had a brilliant relationship with. He left to go to Sunderland again. There was always a person there that you could relate to, who you felt you had that relationship with. Didn't necessarily come from management. So, I'm not going, oh, woe be me, I wish it was there. I don't think like that, but I'm just saying, for people that, when I'm looking now at sports, you look externally, you look at rugby, you look at Gaelic, and you're looking for those, leaders or those managers that you can look at and think, well, their skill set is so much more attuned to creating an environment where people can be themselves, but and a protected environment where they can focus on performance. You know what I mean? And they're the things I look for now. And I'm not saying I didn't necessarily have those, because my personality probably would have been difficult anyway. But that's why I get my buzz now out of seeing, people fulfill their potential and people be able to play freely without all of the madness and distractions that exist around professional sport.
Yeah, and there's just so many, Gareth. But it's just unfortunate that the people that maybe allowed you to be yourself or that you connected with, it's just so unfortunate, just seem to have moved on. When you were by the sounds of, when you were comfortable at a club, just the one or two there that maybe allowed you to be yourself, or you had that comfort with, just seemed to moved on. Who knows, with one of those clubs, if they had a stayed, it could have worked out a little bit different, for yourself as well.
Yeah, but I still think my personality, I would have found a way to mess it up anyway. So I don't, like you say, I don't think about it in great detail.
I know, but look, it's a balance, and as you say, everyone's different, and you have to find your comfort zone, and do what's best for yourself as well. And it is difficult. Gareth, I wanted to ask you, who would you say is out of all the clubs? And I know you played under Jack Charlton and maybe some great players as well. Who's the best player you ever played with? Who would you have at the top?
Oh, that's an easy one.
Paul McGrath.
Yeah, I still say it to people now. Yeah. So a lot of people, again, might not remember. But he was exceptional. Aston Villa used to have 2 Man of the Match awards. They used to have Macca's one, and then there was one for the other 10.
Unbelievable. He was a great player. I've only seen clips when, obviously, I was too young. But I've only just seen clips back. But he just seemed like a mountain in the air, just terrific player.
just everything. Yeah, he was exceptional. So again, having grown up watching him, to get the opportunity to play with him, for him to become a friend was a really,
Yeah.
really big
Oh
thing.
no, incredible player. And tell me, because this is something that's interesting me as well. You said you left at 28, Gareth. I'm just really interested. You happened to go into, I suppose, into law and stuff then. What drove you towards maybe choosing, I suppose, you made the decision to stop. What made you choose to go that route? Was that something you wanted all along, or was it just something you had?
No, there's a piece in between, Christopher, which is where you started. So obviously I fell out of love with it at Bolton at 28, and then I ended up taking the player manager's job at Bohemians for 2 years. And again, this comes back to one of your questions, which was a good one, around when you're a player, you think you just have to concentrate on yourself. And then when you become a manager, you realize you have to deal with playing squad, different characters, personalities, and frailties. And then you also have to deal with a chairman and a board of directors. So Bohemians was between 2004 and 2006. And it was an incredible learning experience, because you would have never got exposure to those challenges anywhere else, I would say, right? But the point was, again, dealing with budgets, dealing with players, dealing with promises, competing against all of your different opponents outside of that. It wasn't easy. And we'd moved back home and found moving back home incredibly difficult, because it wasn't the Dublin of 1992 I had left. So there was a whole host of different challenges again, right? And then I resigned from that role and I went to Cork City, right? And I had an incredible time at Cork. I loved it. I loved the players. I loved the dressing room. I loved the city, right? And so again, as a Dublin man, it was a brilliant dressing room, and I can't speak highly enough of that. But then in my second year, I got sick. I had an aneurysm, and was very, very fortunate to survive the aneurysm I had. So the roundabout kind of answer to your question is, when I was recovering from my illness, I had the UK tax authorities call to my house at a time when the only people calling to my house were family, friends, doctors, or district nurses for a debt I knew nothing about. So I did what everybody does. I phoned my agent, I phoned my advisor at the time, and they sought to placate me and tell me, don't worry, everything's okay, we'll sort it out. And it was a problem. And what I did then was I requested my financial paperwork for years and years. And as part of my convalescence or rehabilitation, I started reading all of the documentation and realized that it wasn't as it had been told to me. So I decided, if I want to understand all of the things that have gone on in my career, I need to understand the law. So again, there's a humbling part to that, because you go and see a lawyer, and you sit in a room, and they use language with you that you don't understand, but you don't want to show weakness, or you don't want to show that you're not worldly outside of your own professional environment. And I decided that if I want to understand what's happened to me, I need to understand the law. So that it's probably a different podcast, Christopher, where you talk, athlete transition and the different challenges that come with that. But the point for me was, it steered me towards the law. I was very, very lucky. I went to a university in Liverpool, and again, you're a teacher, aren't you? So you recognise this, because it is a huge responsibility in teaching. It's a vocation. It's like coaching. I'm incredibly respectful of it, right? But the point is that I went to see one university, and the woman I went to see was incredibly dismissive of me. She was like, oh, you've been out of education for 16 years. You have no chance. Maybe go away and do a foundation course, and then you can come back in a couple of years and you might consider a legal degree. And I went back home to my wife, and it was like the law of the dressing room. I was like, I've just got absolutely slaughtered today, and then I can't do this. And then there was a university close to where I lived, Etched University in Ormskirk. There was an open day, and again, my wife was like, "Are you going to the open day?" I was like, "Oh, I'm not sure I can go and have a day like I had, the other day." But I went up, and it was a completely different environment. Open, supportive. I met a couple of the lecturers, I had to meet the head of the department at the time, who's become a close friend, and his position was, it's going to take you 6-7 years to become a lawyer. Are you really going to do that? Ex-footballer, really? Do you think you've got? Do you think? And it was like, well, yeah, I think I want to do it. And I was fortunate because, learning is an amazing gift, isn't it? Lifelong learning, whatever way you want to talk about it. So the point for me was, from the time I went into university, there was a subject that I was interested in, and people helped me. People helped me develop. People helped me learn. People, gave me confidence to be able to continue with that. So everybody was naturally, oh, you're going to be do you want to be a sports lawyer? And I was like, well, no, I want to be a commercial litigator because I want to understand what's happened to me in the past. So that was my kind of transition. That was my journey towards that. So now I sit here talking to you today, and that's, I'm a lawyer, having been very, very lucky to have a professional football career, very, very lucky to manage, very lucky to play, whatever you want to talk about. But I go to bed, Christopher, I don't go to bed thinking about football anymore. I go to bed thinking about the 8 things I was supposed to do that I haven't done.
Gareth, I don't know what's. I can't believe what I'm hearing almost. It got me really at first when they came to your door when you were ill about the debt. But I didn't really expect to hear next when then you decided to going to become a lawyer, that they'd nearly say, oh, what are you doing here? Or what makes you think you can do that after being out of education? I actually can't believe that someone would just be so dismissive. It's shocking to hear, really, both, to be honest.
Yeah, but sometimes footballers get a bad press. You know what I mean? So like there's a lazy stereotype that, people aren't capable of having a conversation. People aren't capable of moving into other sectors. People aren't capable of, operating at an executive level in different sports or at an executive level in football. And for me, you should always hear more about these people. So like Stuart Ripley qualified as a lawyer after he played football. He won the Premier League with Blackburn Rovers. Udo Onweri played football for years and years. He's now a lawyer. There's a lot of people studying law. There's a lot of people capable of moving beyond their football career. So this comes back to my point about that transition piece, is that if you look at how ruthless professional sport can be, and this is across all sports, you have a situation where I think in football the average career is 8 years, right? So 8 years is a very, very small part of what's hopefully for people a long and happy life, right? But if you look at 40% of professional footballers face the threat of bankruptcy within 5 years of retiring. Over a third of footballers are divorced within 12 months of retiring. Over 30% face mental health issues and addiction issues. Like these are real things. These are things across US sport, across rugby, slightly different because, up until the professional era, people were, educated to a higher level. You look at Gaelic sports, you look at temptation, you look at life challenges, and it's not easy. So I'm not saying that to you where people will listen to the podcast hopefully and go, oh God, look at all those poor people. But the first thing will always be money and fame. Look at the life you have. But that's only a very, very small part of that. So I sit here today and I would say that, I can be open and say I didn't fulfill my potential in my professional career despite having a very, very good one. But I now have a different career. I have a second career, and one I enjoy. I work with, incredibly talented, capable lawyers, people that I respect hugely. And my life has taken a different track, but I'm extremely gracious for how lucky I am. I'm involved in different projects that are incredibly challenging, incredibly stimulating, that I wouldn't probably have had the opportunity without football. But it gives me purpose, which again for professional athletes when they finish their professional sporting career can find very, very difficult.
Yeah, and I'd have to say fair play as well, Gareth, because when you say it, not everybody can finish their football career and go and be a pundit on Sky Sports and just pick it up. Some people really need to start work after it, and you, as you say, have no idea maybe where to go. And, fair play for yourself for making something and doing something and now having it and being, I suppose, comfortable with it, because as you said, even those figures you're throwing out, at me there, I've never even heard of those. So obviously there's a lot that haven't got over the line and maybe have struggled. And the fact that for yourself and lots of others that have done so well, it's great to see, because not everybody's getting the 500,000 a week and stuff like that. And a lot have to think of life after football as well.
Yeah, very much so. And don't get me wrong, the increased salaries in football, the increased revenue in football, there should be more and more players now that retire in a sound financial position. The reality is totally different. You only have to look at the NBA, the NFL, Major League Baseball to see that, right? That it's not the case. And what money gives you is choices and time, but you're still not able to do what you did before. This is the point again, is that, you leave professional sport behind, where you're looking at the person beside you going, well, I'm better than him and I should be doing this and I should be doing that. And then people just step into a different environment where it's still exactly the same. He's a crap pundit, I'm better than him, I should be doing more than him. And you get a particular character that can gravitate towards these things. It's not for everybody.
Yeah, no, it's very difficult, yeah, and only some people can do it. It has to suit you as well. Like, not everybody's born to be a pundit. You have to pick what's right for you. I don't know whether you follow the NFL, but I remember this, I think, from I think it was Rob Gronkowski, who used to play with Tom Brady on one of the teams. And at one of the times they're on the sideline, and he's one of the best players to ever grace the NFL. And he literally says to Tom Brady, if you don't throw this pass, because he has to get so many passes to get his bonus, I'm not going to be able to survive and feed my family, whatever like that. So that's one of the top players to ever play in the NFL, asking someone to pass him the ball so he can get his bonus because he's not going to survive without it. I never forget it, because it's caught live in a clip. And I just thought, how is he in that position? And how many others must be in that position if he's one of the top players? It's just crazy.
Yeah, but the indiscriminate, ruthless nature of professional sport and media is those stories aren't sexy. Those stories don't want to be told. And there's an Irish journalist who wrote a book about retirement, and it's interesting because even for fans don't want to contemplate professional sports people when they finish playing sport. They want to maintain the memory of what they did whilst they were participating. So again, it's a fascinating area. There's more and more interest in it. There's more and more study in it. But again, I'm not here woe be me or woe betide professional athletes who earn huge sums of money while they're playing. I'm just saying that there's another human side and a human story that exists around this that sometimes isn't communicated or isn't seen in the media, and that's all. And that's, like I said to you, that's my experience, and that I have it from I see it with a lot of friends, I see it with a lot of peer groups, from people that I was fortunate to play with or against, and it just comes back to the point I was making, that I think I'm very, very lucky with where I am now, and I'm gracious of that.
As well, yeah, no, and you should be as well, and it is great that you were in that position to be able to do what you were able to do as well. Last question, I just want to ask you, Gareth, just because you said you were maybe, from your own point of view, you were a difficult character to deal with as a player, maybe, or with your personality and stuff like that. When you went into coaching at Bohemians, and you were dealing with players and trying to manage players, was there ever a moment where you were looking around and saying, and thought back to yourself with maybe a manager or a coach trying to deal with yourself or things like that? Was there ever any moments like that when you're a manager and coach and thinking, yeah, I realise now from a manager or coach point of view what they were up against and how tough it actually is?
Yes, yeah, to a degree, and I think that again comes from kind of maturity. Do you know what I mean? So I would have had very strong values of how to play. I would have had very strong values in player development. I would have had a very strong focus on how you do those things. And unfortunately for me, given financial restrictions and different challenges, I wasn't able to implement all of that. But I think that, again, this is part of your journey or your life experience, that I was very naive, because I still thought I could succeed. I still believed that I could succeed, whereas a bit more experience or a bit more worldliness of management or how it works I would have been able to see that at that time that was not possible. Again, with Bohemians, you were dealing with crisis management nearly every day. So again, as somebody who was 28, you have a certain skill set, strong opinions, strong values, strong beliefs. But the point is that you don't have an experience of those things. Again, you come back to the statistics of understanding then why people who get one management job fail and why they never get back in again, and the competitive nature of that, and the small margins that can determine whether you're going to be successful or not. Do you know what I mean? Like, Bohemians was hilarious to me because, I think my first game was a Dublin derby on a Friday, and on the Monday, Bohemians were playing in a League Cup final away to Longford. Longford had home advantage, and they hadn't played on the Friday. You talk about the challenges that if, you players' injuries, you players' recovery, you players' preparations, like having come from a professional environment that, just weren't there. And you're having to like navigate around all of this, board meetings, owner, fan-owned clubs, well-intentioned people, but like who didn't understand that. And the scary thing for me is like that, again, I say to you, that period 2004 to 2006, there was a plan to implement something in Bohemians at that time that was never going to work because our castle was built on sand, right? So you step away from that, and a lot of the people who were there went on to be incredibly successful anyway. Part of the people I worked with looked to implement that same plan in schoolboy football. Do you know what I mean? And help produce and develop 5 full internationals over a period of time. It's just timing. It comes back to what I said at the start, right person, right time, right place. You know what I mean? There's so many factors go into success or failure. Everybody, friends of mine at the moment have been incredibly successful at Bayer Leverkusen, right? So people look at them now and think, oh my God, look what they've done at Bayer Leverkusen, right? They're awesome, but they don't realize that it's taken them 7 years.
Yeah.
7 years.
Nobody wants to hear about the 6 years previous.
Yeah. But
nobody wants to hear about that.
Yeah, so I can look at them now, friends, and go, oh, wow, I'm so happy for them, right? I'm buzzing for them. But everybody just sees them now. They don't see the 6-year journey, the ups and downs along the way, the different challenges that were there. So again, from a Bohemians point of view, it wasn't what it was supposed to be, but it was an incredible learning experience. Do you know what I mean? And again, maybe I lacked the skill set to deal with the media in a different way, to communicate with the fans about the challenges, to understand the different things that were going on there. Do you know what I mean? Players not getting paid their wages. How do you, and the players were incredible, but the player's not being paid his wages for 2 to 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and he's got a mortgage. How is that player going to go out on the pitch with a clear head? How do you manage and navigate all of those challenges? Players leaving, players being able to leave. You talk about the legal world, players being able to use the FIFA regulations on the status and transfer of players to terminate their contract with just cause because they haven't been paid money they were promised. How do you navigate and manage all of those things? You know what I mean? How do you end up being involved in securing short-term lending to pay the wages based on parking contracts with the local hospital? How do you navigate all of these things equally when you're competing against people that have more money than you and have better resources than you? So again, I don't live by these things. It's nice to have an opportunity to speak to you and be asked questions about the past. But as I said, for me, I've been very, very fortunate to have lots of different experiences, but I still want to excel in what I do now. I still want experiences. I want to be involved in high level quality projects on that basis. I want to help people.
Unbelievable. My respect for managers and coaches, just when you list off the things that you have to try and think about, it's gone up to here. It was about here, I'd say, but it's gone up to here now. It's things you wouldn't even think about. Just incredible. Gareth, look, it's been a fascinating conversation. Really loved it. Tapped into areas I didn't think we'd tap into with the legal stuff and different things like that, but so fascinating to hear all about it. And I know you won't rewatch the goal anymore, but I'm going to watch it a couple of more times anyway.
No worries.
Thanks very much for coming on.
No. Pleasure to speak to you. Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Emerald Athlete podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure to leave a review, and don't forget to check out our Instagram page, the Emerald Athlete Podcast.